I'm Naomi Hale, 49, retired Lieutenant Colonel, formerly Cyber Command, U.S. Army. I've worn uniforms for more years than I wore prom dresses, if that tells you anything. And I thought I knew war. But nothing prepares you for the day your own family turns you into a trespasser. Not in a metaphorical sense. No. I mean literally locked out, buzzed off the intercom, police called. All while still in uniform. It started on a cool September evening in Richmond, Virginia, the kind where the air is damp with dying summer, but the light already leans toward fall. I stepped out of the taxi with my duffel bag slung across one shoulder, the fabric still carrying the faint dust of Bahrain, 25 years gone, 2 deployments, 1 code blue, and a chest full of ribbons that now jingled like forgotten jewelry. That street Oakwell Avenue hadn't changed. The sycamore tree still leaned too close to the power lines. The porch light still flickered like it was trying to remember how to glow. I stood at the black iron gate, fingers hovering over the buzzer, heart thudding a rhythm I hadn't felt since Baghdad. The camera above the gate buzzed, tilted, like it saw me. I waited for the click. For the voice, for something. Nothing. I pressed the buzzer again, then again. "Claire," I croaked. "It's me, Naomi." Static. A long pause. Then the front door creaked open, and there she was, Claire Bennett, my older sister, my blood, wearing a blazer so sharp it could slice air and slacks so pressed you could hear the starch hum. She stood at the top of the steps, cell phone already pressed to her ear. "There's someone at the gate claiming to be family," she said flatly. "I'm calling the police now." I didn't move, I didn't shout, I just stared. "Claire, what the hell are you doing?" She didn't flinch. "This isn't your home anymore. You don't just show up after decades, wearing a uniform like that, expecting parades and closure." We moved on. "I just got discharged," I said quietly. "I thought I'd see Mom, maybe Dad." She scoffed. "You should have thought about them before disappearing for 25 years. Her voice didn't shake. Mine did. "You're not in the will," she continued. "You're not even on the deed. Legally. This isn't yours. Emotionally, even less." That hit harder than any mortar round I'd heard whistling down in the desert. I grew up in that house. I bled into the carpet she probably replaced. I pointed to the old sycamore leaning near the attic window. "I broke my arm climbing that damn tree," I murmured. "Remember that?" Claire didn't answer. Her jaw clenched, like any memory of me was a personal inconvenience. "You know that saying, you can't go home again. It's true. Because sometimes home decides it's better off without you." A police cruiser crept onto the street. No siren, just slow-moving blue lights, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. I stepped back. The duffel bag felt heavier suddenly, like it knew this was about to get worse. 2 officers stepped out, one older, one probably fresh out of the academy. The older one paused when he saw me. "Naomi Hale," he asked, brows knitting slightly. "Ma'am, you're recently discharged." I nodded. "Pentagon certified, cyber intel." He turned to Claire, who folded her arms like a courtroom villain waiting for the verdict. "This property," she said, "is legally owned by myself and my husband, Richard Hale. There is no record of Naomi Hale having any legal residence here." My mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "Richard Hale," I repeated. "Dad." She didn't blink. "Yes. He moved in after selling the house we grew up in. This place belonged to Grandpa. I renovated it, legally." I whispered. "I don't care about legal. I care that it was home." The younger officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, unless you have paperwork showing legal ownership or tenancy, we're going to have to ask you to leave." I fumbled in my bag for the discharge papers, but even I knew they meant nothing here. That was the first time I cried in over a decade. Not in combat, not when I coded in that surgical tent, not when I held my teammate's hand as he bled out next to a broken drone. But I cried on that sidewalk in Richmond, Virginia, because a place that built me rejected me. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message. No name, just words. "You should return to base. There's nothing here for you." It was from Mom. I let the phone fall. And through the window, I saw a silhouette in the living room chair, still, unmoving. My father. He didn't get up, didn't wave, didn't even look at me. That night, I didn't book a hotel. I didn't drive off into the sunset. I slept in my car across the street, parked beneath the tree I once fell from, the tree that still bore my childhood. I watched the porch light blink. I watched the wind push against the gutters. I watched the house that was supposed to be mine post a for sale sign on the front lawn, like it was taunting me, like I had never existed. Morning came with that soft golden haze Virginia is known for. My back ached. My hands trembled. My medals clinked in the glove box every time I shifted. I needed coffee, sanity, a plan. So I drove 3 blocks down to a cafe I barely remembered. And there she was, Ruth Clean, my old college friend, now a civil lawyer, with a sharp eye and sharper mind. We hadn't spoken in years, but when she looked up from her tablet, her face softened instantly. "I saw the listing this morning," she said. "No hello, just war mode." She slid the screen toward me. There it was, my house, listed under Raven Holdings, LLC. I blinked. Who the hell is Raven Holdings? Ruth didn't answer. She just handed me a paper. Property transfer deed. Seller's signature, Naomi Hale. "That's not mine," I whispered. "I know," she said. "It's forged." I stared at the printout, at the fake signature, at the notary stamp. My stomach flipped. My hands went cold. "They used your name to move assets," Ruth said quietly. "Your sister, her husband, maybe more." That's when I understood. This wasn't just rejection. This wasn't just family drama. This was theft, fraud, war. And the worst part, the enemy knew my name better than my own family did. "You're not going to like what comes next," Ruth said, folding her arms as she watched me absorb the forged deed. My fingers brushed the edge of the paper, still cold from her printer. The signature stared back at me like a stranger in my own handwriting. It wasn't just the fraud, it was the effort. Someone sat down and pretended to be me, signed away my rights like I didn't exist. That takes a special kind of malice, and someone who knew I wouldn't be around to stop them. "Claire submitted this?" I asked, voice flat. "She didn't sign it herself," Ruth replied, "but the notary on the paperwork, he's already been investigated by the DMV for falsifying affidavits. If we press, it'll crack." So they sold the house through a shell company, Raven Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware. "Of course," she added with a dry smirk. "Classic move, maximum anonymity, minimal traceability. But it gets better." She pulled out another sheet. "Property history. 3 months ago. This house was legally transferred from Raven Holdings to your father and Claire, as part of a consolidation of family assets." My stomach turned. 3 months ago, I echoed. "That's when they sold the old place. The one I actually grew up in." Ruth nodded. "It lines up. They moved out of the original house and into this one. Your grandfather's place. The one you thought was gone." I leaned back in my chair, breath shallow. I hadn't felt this level of betrayal since that email from my mother. "You should return to base. There's nothing here for you." What kind of mother sends that to a daughter freshly discharged from military service? One who's covering something up. Ruth reached into her bag again and produced a utility report. City records show a sudden spike in energy usage at the house, mostly at night. refrigeration level usage, but no permits filed for any commercial installation. Cold storage, I muttered. Basement, she confirmed. I called in a friend from the zoning office, off the record. Of course, he said the blueprints show an extended cellar, not common for that area. I blinked. Let me guess. Nobody's living in the basement. She raised an eyebrow. That we know of. I stared at the document. The numbers blurred into a single. Cold fact, something illegal was happening in that house. And they were hiding it behind my forged signature. My fists clenched under the table. I'd faced enemy fire, scrambled to decode insurgent communication mid-bombing. I'd written eulogies for soldiers half my age, but none of that prepared me for the kind of war you fight when the enemy has your last name. I looked up. I want access. Ruth blinked. Access? Not just to prove the forgery, not just to take the house back. I want to know exactly what they're hiding in there. She hesitated. Naomi, this could be dangerous. If they're storing anything illegal, drugs, weapons, even cash, this isn't just fraud anymore. It's federal. I'm not walking away from this, I said. Not this time. Her eyes searched mine, then gave a slow, resigned nod. Then we start here. I'll file an injunction to freeze the property title. I'll pull a forensic analyst for the deed, and I'll get my zoning guy to request a quiet inspection under health code. And I'll watch the house, I added. Alone. I gave her a look. You know I do better in the field. She sighed. Just promise me you'll keep it legal so far. They've stolen from you. If you break in, you become the criminal. I promised nothing. That night, I parked down the block in my rental car, engine off. Phone silent. I had a pair of military-grade binoculars, an old Nikon with low light mode, and my sidearm locked in the glove box, just in case. I hadn't carried a weapon since the day I turned in my badge and clearance card. But tonight, I felt naked without it. At 10:45, I noticed him. A man, mid-40s, faded jeans, dark jacket. He stood under the corner streetlight like he belonged there, but didn't. He never looked at me, just lingered. When he finally left, I thought he was just another restless local. Until I saw the folded piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. No envelope, no tape, just a clean white square, barely creased. If you're the real Naomi, meet me, Alley 7 behind the bakery. 11 p.m., come alone. No name, no threats, just certainty. I checked the clock, 10:51. I didn't hesitate. I walked. The alley behind the bakery was silent, bathed in the glow of one flickering security lamp. The wind carried the faint scent of flour and sour trash. I kept to the shadows, hand near the inside pocket of my jacket where my recorder rested. Naomi Hale. I turned. The man stepped out from the shadows, mid-40s, beard flecked with gray, marine posture, weathered hands. My name's Ethan, he said. I fix cars now, but I served. I didn't move. How do you know who I am? I saw you get turned away at the house. He replied, and I've seen what your sister's husband does after dark. My breath caught. Men in gloves, black vans, no plates, no lights. They unload crates through the back entrance, fast, quiet, like clockwork. Your brother-in-law's always there, clipboard in hand, never speaks. What's in the crates, I asked. He shook his head. Don't know, but it's cold. I've seen frost coming off them. He stepped closer. They say you're unstable, he said. Combat trauma, lost your grip. I stared back. I've heard worse. I believe you, Ethan said simply. But if you're going to take them down, you need proof and backup. I nodded. I have a recorder, a body cam. You'll need more than that. He handed me something, an old key card. My cousin used to service the HVAC unit there. That card'll get you near the back vent. Don't let them see you. And just like that, He turned and vanished down the alley. I stood in the dark, clutching the card, heart pounding. A war veteran, a forged deed, a house that wasn't just stolen but weaponized. And now, a secret that could get me killed. But I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of disappearing twice. Naomi's next move will take her inside the shadow of her stolen home. But what will she uncover? And how deep does the conspiracy go? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the rental, gripping that old HVAC keycard so tight it left a line across my palm. I stared at the house across the street, not like a daughter who missed her childhood home, but like a soldier watching enemy territory. And honestly, that's what it felt like. This wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was a theft wrapped in a smile, signed with my name, and sealed with silence. Around 3:12 a.m., the house came alive. Headlights off, 2 black vans rolled up and reversed into the driveway like clockwork. Doors opened. Men in dark jackets jumped out. No talking, no shouting. They moved fast, too fast. One carried a dolly. Another grunted as he rolled a crate toward the back entrance. Frost glistened on the metal, even from this distance. I could see it the way mist curled around the edges like breath on glass.
They were keeping something cold? But what?
I pulled my camera from the passenger seat and zoomed in, snapping silent shots. Crate, license plate, one man's face. And then, the porch light turned on. Claire. She stood in the doorway in a silk robe, calm, collected, like she did this every Tuesday. She didn't look at the men. She didn't have to. She just said something I couldn't hear what, and pointed toward the cellar door. They obeyed without hesitation. My finger twitched on the shutter. Then I felt that familiar chill down the back of my neck, the sense of being watched. I turned slowly. Across the street, in the shadows near the fence, someone stood, a man, not moving, arms crossed. When I blinked, he was gone. The next day, Ruth and I sat in her office. She wore that same expression she used to wear in college finals, half tired, half deadly serious. I sent the freeze order, she said, tapping her keyboard. Title is locked, no more transfers, no refinancing, nothing shady. For now. Good, I said, because it's about to get worse. I slid the camera across the table. She clicked through the photos. When she hit the one with the frost on the crate, she leaned in. That's not medical, she said, and that's definitely not food. I nodded. Whatever it is, they don't want it on the books. Ruth exhaled. So now we're dealing with fraud and potential contraband storage. Jesus. It gets better, I said. I think my father's involved. She paused. You think? He didn't even look at me. I murmured. When I stood outside that gate, he was in the chair watching, didn't flinch, didn't wave, like I was a stranger. Ruth's eyes narrowed. That man paid for your first year of West Point. And now he's helping my sister sell off our family history like it's a garage sale. Maybe, she said, or maybe he's being used. I looked up. Don't forget, she added. Your father was sharp, legal background, taught contract law at VCU for 20 years. That's not the kind of man who gets duped, unless he lets it happen. I sat back. That cut deep. She pushed a manila envelope toward me. Background check on Raven Holdings. The founding signature, not Claire. Not your dad. It's someone named Brian Hale. My blood turned cold. Brian, I said, Claire's husband. Ruth nodded. He's been handling import logistics for years. Quiet guy, but 2 years ago, he filed for a separate LLC 1 letter off from Raven Holdings. Looks like a backup shell. So this is layered. Like an onion, she said, or a con job. I stood, my throat dry. I'm going back in tonight. No, she said flatly. You don't have a warrant. I have a key card. She stared at me. You swore you'd keep it legal. I swore I'd get the truth. That evening, I returned to the street wearing black slacks, flat shoes, and a hoodie that still smelled faintly of Afghanistan dust. 11:22 p.m. I waited until the vans left, same timing, same pattern. Once they pulled away, the house fell dark again. Using Ethan's key card, I crept around the rear hedge line. My heartbeat matched the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. I slipped through the side gate, into the HVAC shed. The vent was wide enough for someone small. I wasn't small, but I was determined. Sliding in wasn't graceful. The metal scraped my elbow. And the smell dust, coolant, mold wrapped around me like regret. But I pressed forward. I landed in a crawl space behind the furnace. The house was quiet. Then footsteps overhead. I crouched low, barely breathing. They passed. I reached for my pocket recorder, clicked it on, and pressed forward. The cellar door was ajar. The stairs creaked, each groan a threat. Halfway down, I saw it. The crates. 6 of them, metallic, labeled only with barcodes and a symbol I didn't recognize, 2 concentric triangles, like a warning. And then footsteps, rapid, coming down. No time. I ducked behind a shelving unit, heart hammering. 2 voices. Claire and Brian. Brian sounded tense. We shouldn't be storing them here anymore. She's sniffing around. She doesn't have evidence. Claire snapped. She doesn't even have a home address.
She has Ruth.
A pause. Then Claire's voice dropped. If Ruth pushes, we bury her in paperwork, same way we buried Naomi in silence. I felt something snap inside me, like a nerve I hadn't used in years. They walked out. I didn't move. Not yet. I recorded every word. Then I crept forward, aimed my body cam toward the nearest crate, and zoomed in on the label. Inside the label, beneath a peeled corner, was a shipment origin. Tijuana, Mexico. This wasn't just fraud. This was trafficking. And I had the footage. But as I backed up toward the vent again, my boot hit something. A floorboard. It moved. I knelt, lifted it gently, hands trembling. Underneath another box. Not frozen. Just sealed. I opened it. And what I saw inside was my mother's handwriting. Stacks of letters. To me. Never sent. Marked return to sender. Dozens. Dozens. And one dated the week after my last deployment read, Naomi, don't come home. They've changed. I'm scared. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the words, the loops of her cursive, the ink slightly smudged, like she'd been crying when she wrote it. Then the cellar door creaked again, and someone started walking back down. I had seconds. I grabbed the letters, slipped the floorboard back, moved toward the vent. Too late. A flashlight beam swept across the crates. Stopped. Moved again. Then,
Who's there? Who's there?
the flashlight beam sliced across the cold air of the cellar like a blade, sweeping dangerously close to where I crouched behind the crate. Every muscle in my body tensed. I didn't breathe. My fingers gripped the stack of letters tighter, their edges digging into my palm like tiny knives, my mother's words pulsing against my skin. Footsteps. Heavy, confident. Male. Brian. I heard something, he muttered. Don't screw with me. Claire. Silence. Another step. The light landed on the vent.
Too close?
I dropped low, flattening my body against the cement floor. The dust clung to my hoodie. My heart was in my throat. Then his phone buzzed. Yeah. A pause. She's here. Another pause. No, she won't make it past the fence. I disabled the camera last night. Let me check the... He didn't finish. Because the power cut out. Boom, everything went black. No light, no sound, just the low, humming buzz of the city somewhere outside, and my own pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't wait. I lunged toward the HVAC crawlspace, sliding the recorder and letters into my backpack. My knee slammed against a pipe. Sharp pain shot up my leg, but I kept moving, like muscle memory in combat: move or die. I pulled myself into the shaft just as Brian cursed. Fumbling with the flashlight, its beam jerked wildly. I was gone before it landed. The crawlspace scraped my elbows. I could barely breathe. The air was metallic and stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. But it was freedom. 10 feet 15, I could see the vent at the far end. Almost there. The back door slammed shut. He was coming around. I scrambled out of the vent, rolled into the shadows near the HVAC unit, and bolted across the side yard. My breath hitched, legs burning. I vaulted the low fence like I had a decade ago in basic training and dropped to the other side in a crouch. The street was empty. My rental car sat 3 blocks down, half hidden under a sycamore. I ran. 20 minutes later, I sat in Ruth's apartment, shaking. My hands wouldn't stop. They vibrated like the engine of a chopper under fire. Ruth wrapped a blanket around me and poured coffee. It sloshed a little in the cup, but I didn't care. I just needed warmth. She took the letters from my bag one by one, brows furrowing deeper with each. "These are real," she whispered, postmarked, stamped. "She tried to reach you." "I know," I said, voice hoarse, "but someone intercepted them. Maybe Claire, maybe Brian, maybe Dad." Ruth shook her head slowly. This changes everything. "They called me crazy," I said quietly. "Combat trauma, memory distortion, all those whispers. But it wasn't me losing grip. It was them covering up their own guilt." She picked up one of the letters, smudged ink, faint perfume still clinging to the page. "She was scared," Ruth murmured, and they silenced her. I reached for the camera, pulling up the footage. Crates, frost, symbols, and then voices. "Claire, she doesn't have evidence." "Brian, she has Ruth." The color drained from Ruth's face. "They're watching me." I nodded. "You need to go dark," I said. "Pull back, drop off the legal stuff. Don't be visible." "What about you?" I smiled grimly. They already think I'm a ghost. I might as well haunt them. The next morning, I drove to Ethan's garage. He was elbow deep in the hood of a beat-up Chevy, but looked up the moment I walked in. No hello, just a nod. "You made it out," he said. "I got proof," I replied. His eyes flicked to the backpack. "Good, because they're tightening the perimeter." I raised an eyebrow. "How do you know?" "I used to build them." He said simply, "Security perimeters for supply routes, for DEA. I can smell a lockdown." I blinked. "You were DEA." He gave a dry smile. "Long time ago, before I saw too many agents become the very thing we were chasing." "You think this is drug-related?" He hesitated. "Could be, but something feels bigger, cleaner, more structured. That basement felt federal, like it had a budget." I thought of the crates, the frost, the origin Tijuana. "You think they're smuggling organs?" He looked up sharply. "You saw organs." "No, but I saw cold crates. No branding, medical shipping codes." He blew out a breath. "Then yeah, that fits. High dollar, low traceability, human trafficking and organ black market, especially across state lines. Huge." A silence stretched between us. Then Ethan added, "You ready to bring this public?" "No," I said, "not yet. I need to hit them first. Make them react." "How?" I reached into my coat and pulled out the last thing my mother ever mailed her final letter. By making her voice the one they can't silence. That evening, I posted a digital copy of the letter online. no names. Just the words. I titled it, A Mother's Warning. Don't come home. They've changed. I'm scared. I shared it through veteran forums, private subreddits, legal whistleblower communities. It spread like wildfire. People reposted it, commented, "This sounds real. Reminds me of my uncle's case. My sister went through this." I didn't claim it, but I watched. And then someone emailed me. Blocked sender. No subject. Just this, You think anyone will believe a washed-up soldier with PTSD and no address? And attached a photo of Ruth, walking home. From the back. They were watching. My blood ran cold. I called Ruth. No answer. I called again. Nothing. I paced the room, heart hammering. Then her text came through. "I'm safe. I'm staying with my brother upstate. Don't contact me for a while. Use the burner. You're on your own for now." I stared at the screen. The air felt heavier. They got to her. I was alone again. Later that night, I sat in my car across from the house. The porch light flickered. The windows were dark. But inside, movement. Then the front door opened. My father. He stepped out. Alone. No cane, no robe. Dressed in slacks, button down, tie undone. He looked clear. Not the dazed, passive shell I remembered. He walked to the end of the driveway and stared straight at my car. Like he knew. Then, without a word, he raised his hand and pointed at me. He pointed. Not at my car, not at the streetlight. Directly at me. My father's eyes, once faded with detachment, were now steady. Almost defiant. The old legal professor. The man who taught me chess and cross-examined my high school boyfriends. Was suddenly present. I stepped out of the car. Slowly. The night air pressed heavy against my chest, laced with magnolia and mildew. My boots crunched the gravel in the driveway. He didn't flinch. We stood face to face for the first time in decades. He spoke first. "You always were too stubborn for your own good. And you always knew more than you let on," I replied. A long silence. Then he said something that knocked the wind out of me. I never stopped writing back. "Your mother sent those letters. I sent some too." I stared at him, blinking. "What?" Claire intercepted everything. Started small, misplaced envelopes. Odd excuses. Then the locks changed. One day I came home and my office was boxed up. Files gone. Laptop wiped. She said I was getting forgetful. My heart sank. She gaslit you. Systematically, ruthlessly, Brian helped her digitize our assets. Streamline the estate. I trusted him. Your mother didn't. That last letter she wrote, "I'm scared." She meant it. Didn't she? He nodded, eyes glassy now. She died scared. Alone. And I let her. Silence fell between us. Not empty, dense with everything unsaid. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. "This has everything I could gather in secret. Bank records, shipping manifests, correspondence between Brian and someone named R.J. DeWitt. Looked like an alias. But the payments came from a logistics account routed through Miami." I took it carefully. The metal was warm from his hand. "Why now?" "Because you made them nervous. I saw Claire watching the news. Saw her shaking when your letter went viral. She's losing grip." "She'll fight back," I said, hard. He nodded. "I expect no less from her." I stepped closer. "Why didn't you say anything sooner? Why not help me when I was at the gate?" He looked away. "Because I thought you hated me," he whispered, "and I didn't want to give you one more reason." Back in the motel, I sat cross-legged on the carpet, flash drive in one hand, whiskey in the other. The folder opened on my laptop with a quiet click. And then boom! Emails, PDFs, wiring instructions, photos of crates, codes. all tied to something called Project Vesper. The shipments weren't organs. They were high-grade biomedical materials lab samples, DNA cultures, experimental tissues smuggled across borders for unapproved research. A black market biotech pipeline. I almost laughed. All those years I spent hacking enemy intel across oceans. And the dirtiest op was happening under my family name. On U.S. soil. They'd used my identity to purchase land in Arizona, a defunct medical testing site, then transferred the deed to Raven Holdings, and finally, sold it on paper to Brian Hale, private investor, full circle. I had proof now, but I needed a spectacle. The next morning, I returned to Ethan's garage. He was working on a Mustang, sleeves rolled up. "You look like hell," he said. I dropped the flash drive on his workbench, because I've been to it. He plugged it in. His eyes widened as he scrolled. Jesus, this is enough to trigger a federal investigation. That's the goal. He looked up. You want to go loud? I want to make noise they can't bury. He nodded slowly. I can help, but we need access to their communications hub, the nerve center. The cellar, I said. No, he replied. The attic. Claire runs a hidden network from there. Cell boosters, signal scrubbers. My cousin wired the place, told me she had security needs. Too secure for just house protection. I blinked. How do we get in? We don't. He smiled faintly. You do. That night, dressed in tactical black and adrenaline, I climbed the back lattice of the house I once called home. Every creak in the wood felt like thunder. Ethan watched from the street, feeding updates through a military-grade comlink. Back window, second floor. No sensor. I slipped through with ease. Childhood muscle memory guided me. The hall smelled the same, lavender and floor polish. I could still see the outline of Mom's portrait, now replaced by some sterile modern print. Upstairs, I found the attic door. Locked. But not for long. I pulled a Slim Jim from my jacket and pried the mechanism. Click. Inside rows of monitors. Servers humming, wires snaking across the ceiling like veins. A command center. Red lit. Cold. I plugged in a portable router, began the data dump. Ethan guided me remotely, bypassing firewalls, copying Claire's logs, chats, documents, client names. Then I heard a voice downstairs. Why is the attic light on? Claire. No time. I grabbed the portable, wiped prints, pulled the backup drive. Slipped out the side window. Almost clear. Then floodlights. The yard exploded in white, and Claire's voice rang out behind me. I knew it. I turned, met her eyes. She looked feral, panicked, like a queen watching her empire crumble. You really thought they'd believe you? She hissed. A woman with no job, no address, and a mental health file thick as a Bible. I smiled, pulled the recorder from my chest pocket, clicked play. Her voice, clear as day if Ruth pushes. We bury her, like we buried Naomi in silence. Her face fell. You'll never get away from this, I said. I am the story now. Behind me, sirens. Not from her, from me. Because Ethan had called in the media, every local outlet, independent journalists, even a podcaster who specialized in deep state corruption. The whole front yard was now a sea of flashing cameras and stunned reporters. They caught Claire mid-scream, Brian storming out the back with a suitcase, my father, walking slowly toward the crowd, letter in hand. The truth unfolding in real time. But the final twist was waiting inside one of the crates. Because as the agents raided the basement with hazmat gear, one of them called out, "We found it." And when I peeked inside there, among the vials and sealed tissue samples, was a notebook, handwritten, with my mother's name on the cover. The notebook was wrapped in plastic, sealed carefully like a relic. Not an artifact of crime, but of desperation. My hands shook as I took it from the hazmat tech, the latex gloves slick with humidity. On the cover, in worn gold ink, Eleanor Hale, personal. Eleanor, my mother. I hadn't seen her handwriting in over 2 decades. Yet I recognized the loops, the slants, the flourishes that made her cursive almost lyrical. The kind of penmanship you don't forget because you used to trace it with your finger as a child. I sat on the tailgate of Ethan's truck while the agents swarmed the house and began flipping pages. Page 1 started like a journal. I'm writing this because I don't know who else to trust. If Naomi finds this, then it means my fears were true. And if she doesn't, well, I was always better with ink than with my voice. My throat closed. Ethan hovered nearby, silent, keeping the press from crowding too close. He gave me space. That was the thing about people who've known war. Sometimes they don't ask what you've seen. They just know when to let you sit with it. I turned the pages, each one darker than the last. My mother had chronicled everything, from the day Claire convinced her and Dad to sign over temporary power of attorney while I was deployed, to the first time shipments were stored temporarily in the cellar, to the night she found Brian's burner phone with encrypted texts about cold goods and transfer zones. She wrote about trying to talk to Dad, and how he brushed it off, calling Claire ambitious. How she'd once followed Brian into a meeting at a nearby storage facility, and when he caught her, he smiled and said, "You're not really the curious type. Eleanor, let's not start now." But the page that wrecked me, Naomi, I saw your medals today. Claire had thrown them in a storage bin with old Christmas lights. Your bronze star was tangled in tinsel. I cried. I screamed. But no one heard. Or maybe they just didn't care. I slammed the book shut. Not out of anger, out of heartbreak. They tried to erase her, erase me. But she had written her truth down and hidden it in the very thing they thought they controlled the crate. And now I had it. The fallout came faster than I expected. By sunrise, the news cycle had gone national. Local affiliates were running live coverage outside the house. Ruth, still laying low, sent me a burner text. "The FBI's involved now. You did it." The charges: racketeering, tax evasion, bioethical violations, trafficking of unapproved biological samples. Claire and Brian were both named. My father was not, though a subpoena was issued for testimony. I hadn't seen him since the flash drive. But I got a note, no return address, just tucked under my motel door. "This is your fight now. I did too little, too late. But I'm proud of you, always was." No signature, but the handwriting was familiar. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Because after everything, after the press, the evidence, the arrests, there was still a mother who had died unheard, a daughter discarded, a home twisted into a warehouse of silence. But I wasn't done yet. I contacted the veteran-run podcast Back from the Ashes, told them I wanted to do a live episode, anonymous at first, then name out loud. They agreed. We recorded from a neutral site, a plain room with gray walls, 2 chairs, and a single mic. I spoke for 90 minutes. Told the whole story. Not just the crime, but the betrayal. The feeling of coming home and realizing you weren't wanted anymore. That the war had been easier than what waited for you and your own family. That your absence had become convenient for them. I played Claire's voice, Brian's, my own mother's words from the notebook. When the host asked me what justice looked like, I said, "Justice isn't prison bars. It's memory. It's truth being louder than the lies they told about you when you were gone." And then I pulled out my mother's notebook and read that one line, the one about my medals and the tinsel. The host choked up. The cameraman did too. By the next day, that clip had 2.3 million views. 3 days later, I returned to the house, for the last time. It was empty now, taped off, legally frozen, but the agent in charge gave me 20 minutes to collect anything personal and identifiable. I didn't take photos. I took the shoebox of my mother's recipes, the folded quilt she stitched the year I left for basic. And at the very back of the attic, I found the dusty duffel with my original discharge papers, still unopened, still sealed. Inside a note. "Welcome home, Lieutenant Colonel. I'm sorry for the delay." Typed, government issued, dated 12 years prior. Claire had kept it from me, buried it. Even my return had been delayed. Outside, I stood under the old sycamore, the one my mother planted when I turned 10. Its roots had cracked the pavement. Its branches stretched wider now. But its trunk was still wrapped in the yellow ribbon she tied when I left for my last deployment. Faded, weathered, but there. Still there. I untied it and slipped it into my pocket. As I walked back to the car, a woman stepped out from a black SUV parked down the street. Tall, mid-40s, federal suit. She held up a badge. "Agent Keller, Department of Justice." I nodded warily. What now? She approached me slowly. "We believe Project Vesper extends beyond your family. We've identified 4 other storage sites. Similar methods. Same supply chains." I swallowed. "You're asking me to testify?" She shook her head. "I'm asking if you'd consider joining the task force. We need someone with your skills, your knowledge, and your motivation." I stared at her, stunned. After all these years, being erased, betrayed, doubted, now someone wanted me to help expose the system that tried to bury me. I looked back at the house, then at her, and I said, "I'll think about it." Because I wasn't sure if I wanted to fight again. But I knew one thing. I wasn't done. I sat alone on the bench behind the courthouse, watching a line of clouds stretch across the Virginia sky like someone had dragged a damp brush across a gray canvas. It was sentencing day. Claire had pleaded guilty to 5 counts racketeering, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit fraud, abuse of fiduciary trust, and unlawful biological transport. Brian, facing more charges, had gone silent the moment the FBI widened their net. He was now cooperating with a broader federal probe, flipping like a rotten plank. I hadn't seen either of them since the morning of the raid. But I wasn't here for them. I was here to end it, for me. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Press in the back, federal agents mid-row, and in the front, just 3 people with hands folded tightly in their laps, victims of the biotech scam Claire helped enable. Families who'd paid for hope, only to be defrauded. One woman's son had died waiting for a treatment that never existed. When the judge spoke, he didn't waste time. 15 years, no parole. A small gasp from the gallery. Claire didn't flinch. Her hair was pinned back, jaw clenched. She didn't look at me. But I looked at her, and I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure. Later that afternoon, Ruth met me at the same cafe we used to haunt in undergrad Elmwood Grind. Her laugh came easier now, her eyes clearer. The burner phone was gone. She had her life back. "They're already turning it into a docuseries," she said, shaking her head. I snorted. "Netflix or HBO?" "Apple. Probably with overdramatic music and a red-tinted filter." We both laughed. She grew quiet. "You gonna take the DOJ up on their offer?" I stirred my coffee. "I don't know. I've fought enough battles for other people. Might be time to fight for myself." Ruth leaned in. What would that even look like? Naomi. I didn't have an answer, but I could feel one coming. The next week, I returned to the Arizona desert. The abandoned facility Claire had bought under my name still stood a monolith of concrete and broken promises. The sign outside was rusted, letters peeling, Raven Biomedical Testing Center. The inside smelled of bleach, dust, and regret. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that reminded me of war zones and old memories I couldn't scrub clean. I walked the halls alone, just me, a flashlight, and a camera. I documented every room, every leftover crate, every scribbled note on the wall. I recorded a voiceover my mother's words, my own memories, Ruth's testimony. And then I uploaded it. Titled it simply, "The House They Tried to Build." It was raw, honest, and it went viral in 48 hours. People didn't just watch, they commented. Hundreds of stories, thousands of voices. Veterans who'd been erased by their families. Women gaslit into silence. Whistleblowers crushed by legal threats. I wasn't the only ghost coming back to life. 1 week later, I received a letter in a plain envelope. No return address. Inside, just a single photo. My father, standing in front of the sycamore tree, yellow ribbon tied neatly around its trunk again. Underneath, a note in his handwriting. "This time, I'll be waiting when you return." It broke me. Not because it was sentimental, but because it wasn't. It was simple, honest, no excuses, just an invitation back into something that could resemble family again. So I started writing. Not just my story, but others. I launched a small podcast called Second Recall, interviewed one veteran a week people discarded, betrayed, or silenced. Not every episode went viral. Most didn't, but the comments, those stayed. People were listening, and slowly, so was I. 3 months later, I sat across from Agent Keller again. This time in D.C., inside a nondescript federal building that smelled like carpet glue and printer toner. "I've read the final reports," she said. "The full Vesper web goes deeper than we thought. At least 2 sitting board members at a major pharmaceutical firm are being indicted." "Let me guess, Miami." She nodded. "I want you to know," she continued, "your testimony changed the trajectory of this. Not just legally, politically. People in Washington were forced to confront the fact that even decorated service members can be preyed upon, and that familial power structures aren't immune to greed." I didn't say anything. She leaned forward. "If you ever change your mind, we'll keep a seat warm for you." I stood, shook her hand. But I didn't accept the offer. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't looking for someone else's mission. I was living mine. Before I left town, I made one last stop. The Veterans Cemetery where my mother had no stone. She'd wanted to be cremated, no ceremony, no fuss. But I brought something anyway. The ribbon from the sycamore. And her notebook. I buried it gently beneath a white stone near the edge of the memorial wall. The wind kicked up dust, tugged at my sleeves. I whispered, "They hear you now, Mom," loud and clear, and walked away. Weeks passed. Then months. Life didn't magically get better, but it got quieter. I bought a small house in New Mexico, started teaching cyber ethics online, grew tomatoes, fostered a dog named Murphy, who barked at his own tail but never at thunder. And then one night, while uploading the latest podcast episode, I checked the comments. Top 1, Anonymous. "I found my daughter because of this story. Thank you, MH. I read it 3 times. And then I cried. Not because it hurt, but because for once it healed. We all want justice, but some of us just want to be heard. If you've ever been silenced, if your name was erased, if someone made you feel like your truth wasn't worth remembering, this story is for you. My name is Naomi Hale, and I'm still here. If this story touched you, hit that like button, leave a comment below, or share your own experience. Subscribe to the channel if you believe truth deserves a voice. We'll be back next week with another real story, raw, honest, and finally heard. Story 2. I'm Taylor Knox, 32 years old, born and bred on military bases, saluted before I could walk straight, raised under the gleam of polished metals and the iron silence of command. My father is General Harrison Knox, a name spoken with reverence in every war room and Pentagon corridor from here to Kabul.
And I'm the ghost they edited out of the family portrait.
The last time I stepped into the house, I once called home. I wasn't welcomed. I was escorted to the porch. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. My father leaned in close, the scent of bourbon on his breath, and placed a glass in my hand. The condensation stung against my palm, and his voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear. The porch is for disappointments. That was my welcome back. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. Caleb's promotion celebration. My little brother, Captain Caleb Knox, the golden boy, had just become the youngest company commander in his unit. I pulled my car up slowly through the neighborhood's tree-lined road in Ashbourne, North Carolina, a town so manicured it felt fake, the same one I once imagined retiring to, before my father cut me out like a defective part. Even with the windows rolled up, I could smell the charcoal grill smoking in the backyard, sweet pork, burnt edges, family laughter, sounds and scents that used to mean safety. Now they meant warning. A projection screen flickered to life on the lawn. At first, I thought it was a slideshow, maybe a nostalgic flash of childhood, some old photos from Fort Bragg or that trip to Yellowstone. But it wasn't. It was one photo, crisp, professionally lit, a new family portrait, Christmas-themed, General Harrison Knox, his wife, their son, standing tall in front of this very house, wrapped in string lights. I wasn't in it.
And it hadn't been taken while I was overseas or unavailable. I was here. I had even visited them that week. They had simply waited until I was gone, then called in a photographer. They didn't forget me. They deleted me.
And the worst part, no one noticed I was standing there, just on the other side of the sliding glass door, glass in hand, the ice long melted, invisible among the living.
Let me back up for a second.
The last 3 hours had been a drive through dense pine forests, where the air turned from damp earth to sickeningly sweet smoke as I neared my father's estate. I rehearsed the plan in my head: say hello, shake Caleb's hand, congratulate him, and get out. Stay invisible, be polite, leave no trace.
I walked through the front door like I still had a place there.
The air conditioning hit me like a slap. The house smelled of cedar polish and expensive bourbon. Voices rose and fell in rhythms I knew too well: boisterous military laughter, soft clinks of metals shifting on uniforms, women in pastel dresses clapping politely.
They didn't see me at first. Of course they didn't.
I wasn't the gravitational center of this house. That was Caleb. He stood at the core of the party like the sun, his dress blues immaculate, his smile blinding. He had our father's chin, our mother's poise, and none of my scars. As I slipped toward the drink station, I passed clusters of officers. They didn't flinch. Some of them even knew me. I recognized them from field briefings, joint ops, strategy debriefs. I had once briefed a colonel in that very room. Now, I was the shadow in the corner.
At the punch bowl, I reached for a glass of sweet tea. My hand brushed the cool surface of the pitcher when I saw her Aunt Margaret. Her eyes caught mine. For a split second, we connected.
And in that flash, I saw it. Not disgust, not anger, pity. She turned away. That look hit harder than any accusation. In this house, my presence wasn't a joy. It was a problem to be managed. A smudge on the glass. Dinner was called. and the tide of bodies flowed outside. Long tables under oak trees, white tablecloths, American flag centerpieces. The whole Southern military family aesthetic curated to perfection. I lingered by the sliding door. I knew there wouldn't be a seat for me. I hadn't RSVP'd. I wasn't even on the guest list.
And then I felt it. You don't need to see him to know when he's near.
My father doesn't walk. He commands space. He stepped beside me, his black shoes gleaming, polished to a mirror. His hand landed on my shoulder. Not gently, not harshly, just absolutely. The weight of a man who had moved divisions with a phone call. A general's touch. He said nothing until we reached the threshold of the porch. The door slid shut behind us. I could still hear the laughter outside. Then he leaned in. "Caleb worked hard for this night," he said. His voice was low, controlled, cold. "Don't let your shadow fall on it. Your place is out here." He turned and walked away. Not another word, not even a glance back. I stood on the porch, holding a lukewarm glass of sweet tea, staring through the glass at a party I was genetically related to but completely cut out from. It was like watching a movie on mute. My father raised a toast. I could read the words on his lips even if I didn't hear them. "To Caleb, the son who honors the Knox legacy." Applause. Cheers. My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye. My glass dripped down my wrist. The metal chair under me groaned slightly as I sat. It was the only chair on the porch. I stared at the propane grill beside me. The hiss of the tank was the only sound I could hear clearly. There had been a time I thought I'd sit at that table not as a guest, but as a legacy. But now I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. And that moment, that exact moment, when the projector screen lit up with that sanitized, perfect edited version of our family, that's when it hit me. This wasn't passive exclusion, this was surgical. And the scar it left on my mind wasn't the first. Because 8 years ago, in a rain-drenched forest outside West Point, I saved 3 lives. And it cost me everything. But we'll get to that. First, let me tell you exactly how a loyal, decorated soldier becomes a problem. How a daughter becomes an optical issue. How someone who obeyed every rule ends up on the outside of the glass, watching her family raise a toast to the man she trained better than anyone. Because this story, it doesn't end here. It starts with a map, a lie, and a decision that was supposed to get me killed. ChatGPT deny, they say your childhood shapes your compass. If that's true, mine was welded in iron and drilled at dawn. Growing up a Knox meant saluting your father before you could tie your boots, earning respect with silence, and memorizing the family code by age 6 duty. Legacy, no excuses. My mother, always polished in pearls and pressed linen, called it tradition. I called it a weight. I used to idolize my father. You have to understand that. I studied his every move, how he straightened his cuffs before entering a room, how he never raised his voice but made grown men stand straighter with just a look. He wasn't cruel. He was exact, purposeful, and for a long time, I believed that if I followed the blueprint grades, obedience, West Point, he'd see me, really see me. And for a while, it worked. I was 18 when I received my appointment to West Point. My father didn't smile, but he placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Do not embarrass the name." It was the closest thing to pride I'd ever gotten that night. I pressed my dress uniform over and over until the seams went flat as glass. I didn't eat. I couldn't. My body buzzed with a cocktail of terror and hope. The first year nearly broke me. Not because of the physical grind I could do push-ups until my shoulders burned out. It was the silence. The way certain instructors dismissed you with a glance when you were the only woman in the squad. The way your mistakes got written in ink, but your wins vanished into mist. But I kept going, because every Sunday, I'd get one email from my father, just 3 words: keep the standard. It wasn't affection, but it was contact. And in the Knox house, contact meant currency. By my 3rd year, I was leading live simulation field teams mapping escape routes, analyzing terrain in the Appalachians. I was top 5 in my class, with a record in tactical movement and real-time command decisions. Even Caleb, who had followed in my footsteps 2 years later, would later say, "You were the real damn soldier in this family." But that changed in one night. It was mid-October. Training exercise Wolf Run. We were 10 cadets in full combat gear. Dropped at midnight into the woodlands near Fort Drum. Fog thick as cream. Radios off. Compass and instincts only. The objective: move as a unit from Point A to Point Bravo without being eliminated by instructors posing as enemy interceptors. It was designed to test cohesion under stress. But someone on our team wasn't playing by the rules. Lieutenant Miller, a training officer fresh out of active duty with too much swagger and not enough sense, had volunteered to monitor our group. He wasn't supposed to interfere. But an hour into the run, I noticed him moving markers, subtle at first, shifting red flags, breaking branches to mislead us. I called him on it quietly, privately. He smiled, that smug little twist at the corner of his mouth. "You're sharp. Knox," he whispered. "Let's see how sharp when the pressure's on." 2 hours later, he triggered a misfire drill, something we weren't briefed on. He rerouted 2 cadets down a ravine while the rest of us were told to press forward. One of them, Alex Garcia, twisted his knee. The other, Jane Monroe, got separated. When I doubled back and found them, Miller blocked me. "You're off objective," he barked, loud enough for the rest of the group to hear. "This isn't babysitting. Cadet Knox." But I could see it in Alex's face. He was pale, breathing sharp, borderline shock. If we kept moving, he'd be stranded. If we stayed, we'd fail. So I made the call. I ordered our unit to halt, called in a medevac signal, and stayed behind with the injured cadets. It wasn't heroic. It was necessary. 3 hours later, command pulled us from the field, back at base. I wrote a full report, attached maps, timestamps, GPS data, and waited. What I didn't know was that Miller had already filed his own version. He claimed I panicked under stress, disobeyed orders, and compromised mission integrity. He omitted the injuries, omitted the unauthorized changes to the course, and my father. He didn't call. He didn't ask. All I got was a letter, unsigned, informing me that my field command recommendation had been withdrawn. My final semester at West Point would be administrative only. In one sweep, I went from future brigade leader to invisible graduate. I remember sitting alone in my dorm the night the news broke. The medal I'd earned for leadership under adverse conditions still lay in its velvet box, untouched. I flipped it open, ran my fingers along the inscription. Then I closed it and buried it in the bottom drawer. That medal has only seen daylight twice since. Once, when I almost threw it into the Hudson, and once, well, you'll see. But the fallout didn't stop there. When I came home for graduation, my mother greeted me at the door like I was a visiting nurse. Caleb was already prepping for his own admission interview. The air felt tight, like every room had one less chair than people. At dinner, I overheard my father on the phone with a colleague. "Yes, she's taking a desk track, better suited for paperwork." He didn't know I was listening. He didn't care. I wasn't punished for a mistake. I was erased for choosing morality over the chain of command. And that decision, that moment in the woods, it was the first brick in the wall between me and the people who shared my blood. So when I stood on that porch, years later, holding that glass of melted ice and staring at a portrait I'd been scrubbed from, I wasn't shocked. I was just Done. But here's the thing about military families. They think silence means surrender. And my silence was strategic, because I had just received a message, an encrypted one, from someone I hadn't heard from in 8 years. 4 words.
They're lying. I'll talk. It took me exactly 12 minutes to respond to that message.
12 minutes of pacing back and forth across the porch. The bourbon glass still sweating in my hand. The sound of distant laughter from the backyard party grating against every inch of my skin. My jaw clenched so tight. I could hear the crack in my molars. They're lying. I'll talk. No name, no contact details. Just a scrambled signature that I decoded almost immediately, J.M. Jane Monroe. The same Jane I stayed behind for. The one Miller had led into that ravine during Wolf Run. The one I'd helped extract. Then watched fade into silence like the rest of them. She wasn't just alive. She was ready. My thumb hovered over the screen. The message had come through a secure channel military-grade encryption. The kind you don't touch unless you know how to cover your tracks. I tapped once. Where?
A second later, Denton, Virginia, Tuesday, noon.
No more details, but that was enough. I left the party without saying goodbye. No one noticed me slip past the propane tank and into my old pickup. The bourbon glass stayed on the porch railing, sweat ring and all. A ghost's calling card.
As I drove through the darkened roads of Ashbourne, headlights slicing through patches of fog, I didn't feel fear. I felt a kind of hunger. Not for revenge, at least not yet. For truth. For something clean. Without the stink of ceremony and power plays. You'd think 8 years of silence would harden you. But it doesn't. It just makes the questions louder. By the time I crossed into Virginia the next morning, I had gone over every moment of that field exercise at least 20 times. The split decision, the medevac call, Miller's face when I radioed command. But now, for the first time, someone else was ready to speak. Denton was a quiet town. Nothing special. An old textile mill, a hardware store that still used handwritten receipts, and a diner with faded red booths and stale coffee. That's where I found her. Jane Monroe hadn't aged the way most soldiers do. She didn't carry her trauma in her posture. It was all in her eyes. She was already sitting when I arrived, hair pulled back, eyes flicking to the window every few seconds like she'd never left field training. When I sat down, she didn't smile, just nodded. Her fingers toyed with a napkin like it might reveal a map underneath. Taylor, she said, and my name sounded like both apology and relief. We didn't order anything.
She reached into her coat and slid over a folder. Manila. Worn. The edges curled like a question mark. I kept everything, she said. Inside were copies, dozens of pages, transcripts, field logs, a printed email thread between Miller and a colonel I didn't recognize. They wanted to bury the report. Jane whispered, voice just above a breath. They offered me a recommendation letter if I said you disobeyed protocol. I looked up, locking eyes. And you did? She looked away. I didn't say you panicked, but I didn't say what really happened, either. I told them I got separated, left it vague, safe. I couldn't decide what hit harder, her honesty, or the fact that it didn't surprise me. And now I asked. Jane leaned forward, voice steadier. Now I work cybersecurity for a defense contractor. They've been sweeping internal files. Someone's trying to erase old field data. I recognized your name in one of the queries. It was labeled optical risk mitigation. That phrase stopped me cold. Optical risk. That's how they saw me now. Not a threat, not a hero, just a problem for their PR. I flipped through the folder again. One photo caught my eye. A still from a body cam. Night vision, grainy, but unmistakable Miller, moving a field marker. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to raise hell. Why now? Jane, I asked, after all this time. She didn't answer immediately, just stared at her hands. Then she whispered, "Because I have a daughter now, and I don't want her growing up in a world where people like him win." For the first time, I felt something crack open. Not forgiveness, but something adjacent to it. I stood, slid the folder into my coat. "I'm going to fix this," I said. Jane didn't smile, but her chin lifted just a little. "I think you're the only one who can." I drove back to D.C. in a storm, not metaphorical actual sheets of cold rain that smacked the windshield like warnings. My wipers struggled. My mind didn't. There was no decision to make. They thought I was a ghost. They didn't know I'd kept receipts too. And I had one more ace. Before I left the Army, I'd been assigned to Joint Intelligence Liaison, admin work, mostly, but I still had access to a private drive one Miller had forgotten existed. I logged in that night. Password still worked. Inside, buried 6 folders deep, was a zip file labeled Blackbird Records, encrypted, time-stamped, with field notes from Wolf Run, and a private memo from Miller bragging about how he redirected Knox's team to test stress thresholds. It was enough. Enough to burn him. Enough to raise questions about my father's knowledge. 2, because one of the seaside recipients on the chain mage, General Harrison Knox. My blood went cold. This wasn't just Miller. My father had known. He knew what they did. He knew I hadn't failed. And he let the lie stand. I stared at the screen, the glow of that email lighting up the dark like a slow detonation. Everything I had believed, everything I had blamed on politics. Protocol, cowardice was suddenly crystal clear. My father didn't just let me fall. He helped push. And now I had proof. But proof isn't power unless you know how to use it. And that is exactly what I'd been training for. ChatGPT'd and I. It's funny how quickly grief can mutate into strategy. The moment I saw my father's name in that email chain, Major General Harrison Knox CC'd on a memo covering up Miller's misconduct, something inside me didn't break. It sharpened. I closed the laptop, my pulse like gunfire in my ears. My hands were ice cold, but my mind was hot, blazing. Calculating. The betrayal didn't surprise me. Not really. But what stung, what carved me from the inside out, was the realization that he'd always been willing to sacrifice me to protect the legacy, even if the legacy was built on lies. I could have taken it public that night. The files, the body cam stills, the comm logs, all enough to ignite a firestorm online. One leak to a journalist, and headlines would roar General Knox, implicated in field cover-up scandal. But that would have been too clean. And way too easy. Because I didn't want a headline. I wanted him to feel it. Feel the same isolation, the same invisible rot, the same public shame I'd swallowed for 8 years. So I started planning. Step 1 was smoke. I logged into an old burner account I'd used when I was still posted in Quantico. It hadn't been touched in 6 years, but I knew it was still tied to some low-level military Reddit boards and unofficial vet forums. I posted a question, disguised as an ROTC student doing research. Anyone ever hear about strange adjustments during Wolf Run 2017? The replies came fast. A few shut up, boot, some jokes. But one reply stood out. From a user named Burnbag71. If you know, you know. Cadet Command took orders from higher than they admitted. It wasn't just a training exercise, it was a performance test. Performance test. Those 2 words were a direct echo from the Miller memo. I DM'd the user, and 2 hours later I had confirmation it was Peterson, Sergeant Avery Peterson, one of the instructors on site during Wolf Run, a hard-nosed, by-the-book NCO who'd retired quietly 3 years ago. And, apparently, he'd kept a copy of the original field notes. We agreed to meet. Peterson lived in a modest house in Alexandria, Virginia retired life. A dog. Quiet routine. But when I stepped into his kitchen, the tension was instant. He looked older, heavier, but his eyes were just as alert as the day he used to bark drills at my team.
"I figured you'd come knocking someday," he said, sliding a thumb drive across the table. "I didn't touch it yet. Why didn't you come forward back then?"
He exhaled, long, shameful, because I was tired, and because your father made it clear speaking up would end more than just my pension. I nodded. I understood. He poured black coffee into 2 chipped mugs. The bitterness hit like gravel on my tongue, but I drank it anyway. The brass knew Miller was unstable. Peterson continued. They let him test how far a promising cadet could be pushed before cracking. You weren't just training, you were a case study. I didn't respond. My knuckles were white around the mug handle.
They needed to prove that female command candidates lacked battlefield clarity under stress. You didn't fail. Taylor, you ruined their narrative.
That was the moment my stomach turned, because it hadn't just been about me. It had been systemic, weaponized bias, paraded as performance metrics. I wasn't collateral. I was the control variable. I took the drive, left without a word. Back at my apartment, I lit a candle for no reason except to prove to myself I still could. Something soft, something human. Then I got to work. Step 2, pressure. I compiled a digital dossier. Not a public leak yet. This was personal. I sent 1 encrypted copy to my father's assistant at the Pentagon. No subject line, no explanation, just the files, and a single sentence. Do you still think the porch is for disappointments? The reaction came fast. At 2:14 a.m., my phone rang. Blocked number. I didn't answer. It rang again. Then a third time. At 2:21, a voicemail landed. My father's voice. Controlled. Tight. Taylor, we need to talk. This isn't the way. I played it twice, just to hear the strain in his throat. Then I deleted it. Step 3 was the most delicate exposé Miller. He'd been promoted, of course, into a PR training role at a private defense firm. Still lecturing, still writing op-eds in military journals about discipline through adversity. I started dripping files. A clipped body cam still to a reporter at Stars and Stripes. A redacted version of the field memo to a watchdog blog for female veterans. An anonymous tip to the ethics committee at his current employer. The whispers turned to chatter. The chatter to noise. And by the end of the week, Miller was placed on temporary administrative leave, pending investigation. The predator was cornered, but not yet crushed. And then, step 4, the one I'd been dreading. Confronting him. I didn't send an email. I didn't call. I showed up. Military networking gala, Hyatt Regency Ballroom. The kind of place where war crimes get washed with champagne and outdated flag pins. He was there, standing next to a display of framed commendations, smiling like a man who'd never known consequence. I approached in dress black, simple heels, metal pinned discreetly on my left breast. He turned and froze. I didn't smile. "Hello, Lieutenant." He blinked. "Captain Knox. I think you know why I'm here." He chuckled nervously, tried to lead me away from the crowd. I followed. We stopped just outside the main hallway, under a portrait of some 4-star fossil. He leaned in. "What do you want?" "Taylor." I didn't flinch, an apology, a public one. His eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're playing with. People like your father." I cut him off. "I have the emails, the footage, the reports. You were the experimenter. I was the evidence." His face dropped. A beat of silence. Then, Venomsoft, he said, "You won't win. People forget. They move on." I stepped closer, nose to nose. Not when the daughter of General Knox speaks. Not when the experiment talks back. He swallowed hard. "You wouldn't dare." But I already had. Because as we stood there, The video file had already gone live on a private YouTube link sent to every female cadet, every military journalist, every ethics board, every watchdog group in the country. And by the time I stepped outside, the gala's still buzzing. My phone vibrated with a message from Jane. It's spreading, fast. But before I could even slide the phone back into my coat, it lit up again.
Unknown number. One-word message.
Enough. From my father. I didn't reply to the message. Enough. One word. A command. Really. My father's favorite kind of sentence, short, declarative, and devoid of humanity. But I wasn't a cadet anymore, and he wasn't my commanding officer. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the video had crossed 60,000 views. By midday, it was over 200,000. Veterans, whistleblowers, even cadets from Fort Benning were sharing it with captions like, "We knew. We stayed quiet. Not anymore." And Miller, he went dark, deleted his LinkedIn, locked his Twitter, issued a hollow statement through his firm's legal rep. I categorically deny these allegations. Too late. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt awake for the first time in years.
But the real war wasn't digital. It was personal. At 6:47 p.m., I received an official invitation Pentagon envelope, hand-delivered by a stone-faced courier.
Request for private mediation, General Harrison Knox, Rite, and Captain Taylor Knox. Location, Arlington Officers Club. Date, Friday, 1800 hours.
No press, no PR team, no lawyers. Just father and daughter.
Just truth. The Arlington Officers Club was built like a fortress, disguised as a golf resort. Walls of polished stone. Chandeliers modeled after old W-2 airfields. I wore a black suit. No rank insignia, no heels, just clean lines and silence.
He was already seated.
General Knox, medals retired, suit civilian, posture still a blueprint for obedience.
He didn't stand when I entered, didn't speak,
just nodded toward the seat across from him. A whiskey sat untouched at his elbow. I sat. The silence stretched long enough to be its own room. Then he finally said, "You've made your point." I smiled, but it didn't touch my eyes. Not yet. He breathed in slowly. "You've damaged lives, careers."
"No, I exposed rot." I said, "You just don't like that it's yours."
He looked older now, like the lies had finally aged him, but the core of him unflinching. Rigid still pulsed beneath the surface. "You think this vindicates you?" he asked. "You think public shame replaces duty?" I leaned in. "You think burying your daughter to protect a narrative is what duty looks like?" His jaw ticked. That was the first crack. I placed the drive on the table between us, the same one Peterson gave me, the same one with his name in the metadata. "Your legacy," I said softly, "is built on omission. You've spent your life curating an image, and the second it got messy, you cut out anything that didn't fit." He didn't deny it, didn't flinch, just swirled the whiskey. "You were never meant to lead," he said quietly. I laughed short, bitter. "No, I was just meant to bleed." He finally looked me in the eyes. "I signed the memo because I believed Miller. I believed you'd lost control." "But you had the footage," I said. "I didn't need it. I had my instinct. I trusted the system. And when it became clear the system was corrupt, his silence was the answer." I stood. "I'm not here to ask for an apology," I said. "I'm here to give you a choice." His eyebrow twitched. "A threat." "A courtesy." I slid an envelope across the table. Inside a pre-drafted resignation letter. From him. "I leak this to the Hill tomorrow, and they'll force a Senate ethics inquiry. Or you sign this, and step down quietly from every advisory board you sit on. No more interviews, no more op-eds. You become what you made me, a ghost." He didn't open the envelope, didn't move. just stared at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was, because this version of me, the one who wouldn't flinch, he'd never met her. He spoke slowly.
They'll forget. The news cycle will move on.
I nodded. Maybe, but I won't, and neither will Caleb. His eyes flashed.
Yeah, I went there.
Ask yourself, I whispered, how long before your perfect son starts wondering how perfect you really are? That hit hard. I didn't wait for an answer. I walked out. And as I stepped into the night air, the wind crisp against my face, my phone buzzed again. A text. From a number I hadn't seen in years. We need to talk. It's about Caleb. I hadn't heard from Miranda Monroe since the day I handed her sister that medal. She'd been just 16 then, sharp-tongued, too smart for her own safety, and fiercely loyal to Jane. Now her name popped up on my screen like a ghost tapping the window. We need to talk. It's about Caleb. The message came through, signal encrypted, untraceable. She wasn't being cautious for fun. I responded with one word, where. We met in the back booth of a dive bar in Annapolis, the kind of place where the jukebox still played Johnny Cash and the barkeep served bourbon in plastic cups. It was pouring outside thick, relentless rain that turned the windows into frosted glass. Appropriate. Miranda looked older, but not weaker. Her hair was buzzed short, a small tattoo of a crow inked behind her ear. She didn't waste time. Your brother is in trouble, she said. Big trouble. I didn't blink. He's always been your father's golden boy. What kind of trouble could possibly stick to him? She slid a thumb drive across the table, the kind that doesn't go away with medals. I plugged it into my burner laptop right then and there.
Video files, emails, transaction logs. One file in particular stood out, Re-Civilian Intercept, Training Extension Request.
It was dated just 3 months ago. The sender, Caleb Knox, and the contents, requests for advanced simulations during reserve officer training exercises, simulations involving civilians under controlled duress. Blurred lines between role play and psychological pressure. One note made my stomach churn. If the subject is compromised emotionally, the test is successful. No prior warning should be given. I sat back, fingers curling into fists. He's repeating it. Miranda nodded. They're running the same playbook they used on you, except now they're training others to do it. Caleb is the architect. My throat went dry. This wasn't just legacy anymore. It was a pattern, a system. And my brother was building it brick by brick. Back in D.C., I tried calling him. No answer. I didn't leave a voicemail. There was no version of that message that could be contained in words. Instead, I drove to the Knox estate. Rain still poured sideways now, as if the sky was furious with the earth. The porch light was off, but the door was open. I walked in. No one greeted me. Just silence and the echo of old floorboards beneath my boots. I found him in my father's study. The fireplace flickered low. He was standing in front of the family portrait, the new one, the one I wasn't in. His back was to me. I wondered when you'd show up, he said, voice low, like we were in church. I thought you were smarter than him, I said. Turns out you're just better dressed. He turned, and for a moment, I saw it. A flash of the boy who once snuck me candy rations during field training. The kid who cried when I left for West Point. But it passed. You don't understand what we're building, he said. It's not personal. That's the problem, I snapped. It's never personal to you people until someone bleeds. He stepped closer, calm, measured. We need stronger officers, adaptive, ruthless. We're fighting wars with ghosts now, not uniforms. I laughed, bitter. And that justifies experimenting on cadets, breaking them for sport. He didn't answer, just stared at me like I was a puzzle missing too many pieces. Jane sent me the files, I said. Miranda confirmed the rest. You're not just a participant, You're the engineer." His face twitched. Not guilt. Frustration.
"You have no idea how much our name protects you," he said. "Even now. Even after all your noise."
That was the final nail. Because for him, this was still about the family brand, still about image, reputation, inheritance.
I stepped forward, inches from him. "I'm going public. You won't survive it. And this time, Daddy won't be able to hide the body."
He shook his head, almost amused. "You always wanted to destroy us."
"No," I said, quietly. "I wanted us to be better."
As I left the study, I noticed something on the desk. An envelope, sealed, labeled with a pentagon crest. I recognized the formatting instantly. Nomination letter for civilian military liaison, Caleb's. His ticket to even higher power. And I had enough evidence to shred it into dust.
That night, I made one final call to Jane, told her I was ready.
She already had a contact waiting at the New York Tribune, a journalist with a background in military justice and a history of breaking scandals that toppled careers.
"I'll meet her," I said. "Give her everything."
We set the meeting for Sunday.
But Sunday never came.
Because at 4:43 a.m., I received a call. Unknown number, I answered.
A deep breath on the line.
"Then Taylor, it's your mother. Caleb's missing." The words barely registered. "Caleb's missing." My mother's voice cracked like dry wood on the line. She hadn't called me in years, not birthdays, not even the day Dad retired in disgrace. But now, at 4:43 a.m., her number lit up my phone, cutting straight through the fog of everything I thought I had prepared for. "He didn't come home last night," she said. "His car's still in the driveway, but his phone, he left it behind." That wasn't like him. Not Caleb. He was always calculated, always prepared. Leaving his phone was either deliberate or a message. I was already in my car before she hung up. The Knox estate was quiet. Too quiet. The rain from the day before had dried, but the sky still hung low and sullen, like it knew something we didn't. His room was undisturbed. No signs of struggle, no packed bag. Just the framed photo of us on the fireplace mantel, me, him, and Dad at graduation. I was the only one not smiling. I walked outside, circling to the old workshop our grandfather had converted decades ago. Caleb used it for his quiet projects, which really meant classified models, 3D simulations, and encrypted servers. The door was ajar. Inside stillness, dust particles catching the morning light like floating ghosts. But on the workbench sat a single object, a silver Zippo lighter, blackened on one edge, the same one I gave him 10 years ago after I returned from Kandahar. A symbol. He'd been here, and he wanted me to know. Jane met me at a nearby diner an hour later. She looked tense, pale.
"There's been chatter," she said, sliding me her phone. "Anonymous whistleblower forum. Someone posted this an hour ago."
The post read, "When the air disappears, the system reboots. This isn't desertion, this is rejection. No username, no trace." But I recognized the phrasing. It was Caleb's. He was speaking in code phrases we'd used during field simulations, and one part stood out: rejection. He wasn't running, he was pulling the plug. That night, I hacked into our old shared cloud vault, the one we used in college, to pass encrypted files when we were trying to hide our correspondence from Dad. One file had been updated just that morning.
A single video.
I clicked play.
It was Caleb, pre-recorded, sitting in the workshop.
He looked tired, not scared, just hollowed out.
"Taylor, if you're watching this, it means I've made a choice. I thought I could reform the system from inside. I thought Dad's way could evolve. I was wrong.
The truth is, you were never the enemy. You were the mirror, and I couldn't face what it showed." He took a long breath.
"They're building something worse now. Private contractors, civilian labs. The Wolf-run model is expanding, and I helped design it.
His voice cracked. But now I've deleted everything. Burned it. Files. Servers gone.
I'll be a pariah, maybe worse. But at least it ends with me.
He looked straight into the camera. Don't look for me. The screen went black. I sat in silence for a long time. The weight of 8 years. 8 betrayals. 8,000 unanswered questions, all pressing down on my chest like a slow collapse. He was gone. Not dead, but erased, self-exiled. And in that moment, I didn't feel victory. I felt grief. Not just for him. For all of us. For the truth that had cost so much to unearth. For the family that was no longer a family. For the little girl who once wanted to wear her father's uniform and was handed his shadow instead. The story broke 2 days later. General Knox implicated in DoD cover-up. Captain Taylor Knox blows whistle on training scandal. Pentagon orders formal investigation into psychological abuse. Allegations. They called me brave. They called me rogue. They called me everything except what I really was tired.
Peterson testified anonymously. Jane released her own statement. Miller resigned under health complications and vanished into quiet obscurity.
And Caleb.
The world never knew. He became the ghost he always feared I'd be.
I stood at the edge of the Potomac the next week, flicking that old Zippo open and closed. Click, flame, click, gone. It felt right. The lighter was tarnished now, but it still worked. A symbol of everything lost and everything left behind.
You want a clean ending?
I know, I do too.
But here's what I'll give you instead.
No, I didn't rebuild the Knox family name. I dismantled it. No, I didn't reconcile with my father. He retired quietly. His name scrubbed from public panels. I heard he sold the estate. And Caleb.
I get postcards sometimes. Blank ones. Different cities. No signature.
But the stamp is always crooked. And that's how I know it's him. So here's the lesson. Justice doesn't always look like gavel strikes and press conferences. Sometimes, justice is the silence that follows truth. The space where old systems fall apart. And freedom. It's the moment you realize you never needed their permission.
If you've made it this far, thank you.
Now tell me, what would you have done?
Let me know in the comments, subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear it.
And remember, some legacies are meant to burn. Until next time, Taylor.